Hello, everyone. This is your host again, Dena Davis, for another episode of the Business Breakdown. And today I have a special guest with me, Mr. Damir Bresic from the VCO Group. Damir, if you could offer an introduction for yourself, we'd appreciate that.
Hello, Dina. Thank you for having me. My name is Damir Bresic, as Dina mentioned, and I'm the founder of the Virtual Cyber Office Group, also known as the VCO Group for short. And it's an Ohio-based business, and our mission is to help SMB businesses with their cybersecurity needs. And SMB, for those of you who may not be familiar or aware, is focused on small, medium-sized businesses, and that is our passion to help them out with their cybersecurity needs.
Awesome. So that's actually a perfect segue for us to talk about our topic today is cybersecurity. So I've got Demir with me here today, and we're going to get into some deep breakdown topics around some things that are interesting for business owners to be aware of related to cybersecurity, some of the pitfalls. I mean, we'll get all into it. So just stay tuned with us. So let's start right on in. So Demir, cybersecurity, especially in today's world,
Hmm.
it is, you hear it all the time. You
Hmm.
hear of breaches.
Hmm.
We have so much more activity online as ourselves as individuals and as business leaders.
Sure.
So, let's just start. Like, tell me a little bit about cybersecurity. What do you think is a good place for us to start?
So that's a great topic, but it's actually an extremely vast topic and has multiple dimensions. The old way of thinking about cybersecurity when I started in this business in 2002 was really sort of a moat. If you think about a castle, right, and you had your kind of the exterior defenses, and so the network team would kind of go out there and do all their neat little practices to really just protect organizations, or smaller companies would get their antivirus systems out. That's, I would consider that the dark ages, right? Today we are in a much more sophisticated, much more advanced aspect. Simply put, the monetary value isn't anymore in the currency. The monetary value today is actually in your information. And so what these folks are looking for, and it could be from an individual hacktivist all the way to, we hear about nation states. Well, what are nation states looking for? What are these hacktivists looking for? And they're just looking for your data. And from my perspective, that is the one most critical thing. If we can talk to your folks about what they need to protect, they absolutely need to protect their data at all costs. Because that information gets sold, and we all hear about the dark web, but that information gets sold and there's value. Your name, your date of birth, your social security number, those literally have value tags associated with them out on the dark web. And if you're able to consume, let's say, an entire database, right, somebody's whole e-commerce database, they have 1,000 customers, and all that loyalty programs or whatever, you have that stored somewhere. Well, guess what? You have not only their personal information, you might have their credit card information, you might have their business information. And when that gets taken and put out onto the dark web, a lot of value. It could actually get pieced and parted out. And unfortunately today, it no longer is, the commodity aspect isn't anymore dollars or cents or pounds or rubles or anything of that caliber. It's actually in Bitcoins. And the problem with Bitcoins is they're exceptionally difficult to trace. And that's why the threat actors love to use Bitcoins. And last time I checked was a couple of days ago, but a single Bitcoin from a few years ago that was worth a couple of $1,000 as of a few days ago is now worth $54,000. So a considerable amount of value when you hear, they want your information for 4 Bitcoins. Well, that doesn't seem like a lot of money when you think about 4 Bitcoins. When you look at what the value of a Bitcoin is and you translate into $200,000, you're like, okay, now that's starting to make some sense.
Right, right. So let's take a step back when I think about all of this. Like you said, is such a vast topic.
Hmm.
How do we even start, say, as a business owner? Because we're focused on trying to get customers,
Hmm.
trying to grow our business, trying
Hmm.
to support our employees.
Sure.
And, I've seen actually a lot of people recently been sending out notices about people's identity of their business
Hmm.
has been something that's been more prevalent in recent years. Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, I've seen that. So just to take a little bit of a step back, rather, with regards to, just let's start with the simple aspects. trying to understand the core, let's call them the big five, right? The top five threats of today. And so what we do is we will sometimes go to organizations, smaller organizations, just like you were just outlining, who may not actually understand what is cybersecurity. And one of the things that we'll then do is we'll give them what is commonly known as a cyber awareness campaign, and it's typically a 45-minute overview, and we really talk about what are the key cyber threats, and I'll share them with you here, and I'll go into whatever depth you'd like me to. But things like phishing attempts, ransomware attempts, protecting your data, especially if you have your own internal servers. If you're still doing, physical products, you have your own internal servers that are internet facing from an e-commerce perspective, making sure that there isn't sensitive data on those servers as well. Strong passwords, and then of course patching. I'm very passionate about that. When in my career, whenever I've joined an organization in a leadership capacity, one of the very first things I've looked at is, how strong is their response plan if there is an incident? So like a phishing attempt, what do they do from a monitor detection perspective? And we could talk about that if you'd like. And then also vulnerability management, which is where the patching aspect comes from. So again, for more the medium-sized organizations, that's really, really relevant. For the smaller organizations, the biggest aspect would be make sure your employees, which is the number one deterrent, again, a phishing attempt, are fully aware of what a good phishing attempt is. So when you get a link from somebody who you think is a trusted client or a stakeholder of yours or a partner or whatever, but there's something about that email that just doesn't look right, a misspelling, or the simplest thing for those of you who aren't aware, just hover your arrow over the link, and what'll typically happen is a hyperlink will then pop up, right? And that hyperlink should be, so for example, if it's like a lot of folks like to do Amazon or some sort of a bill or things of that caliber, excuse me. And if you hover over that link, but all of a sudden that link doesn't go to Amazon.com, whatever, and it goes to some obscure site, that's pretty much a very indicative site, or a sign rather, that's probably a phishing campaign or some sort of a phishing attempt. I recently went and talked with a small insurance agent, and he was talking to me about that being his number one fear. And the more I talked to him, the more I saw some of these other aspects that I just talked about. He only had two servers. He had an email server and a primary server with all of his information, but yet any one of his employees had the ability to log on to those servers. And then when I asked them, I said, do they all have individual passwords? And they're like, no, they all use my password. Right.
Oh,
And so there were, right. So, and that is an extremely common aspect, especially when you think about insurance agents in a non-captive aspect, right? They're not like tied to a particular company. They could have 20 particular carriers rather, their systems, they're up on all of them. And sometimes it's that need for efficiency and effectiveness that stems into these bad habits. So we come back to them with an awareness campaign of, well, this is what a threat actor does. This is what a threat actor looks for, to really help them out and really give them that information and educate them a lot more.
awesome. Now, let me ask you a question. So, I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
about with phishing. I think one I've seen more recently is something like Office. I've been getting one about Office 365.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just think about some of the advice that you just gave. And the first thing I saw was it said that I got an audio voice message from
Mm-hmm.
Office 365.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what was interesting about that? I don't have anything for audio with Office 365.
Sure.
So, as I thought about that and I was just listening to you, that brought that memory back to mind because it immediately I sent it off to a friend of mine and said, hey, kind of someone like you. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, can you check this? Yeah, this looks suspicious, and lo and behold, it was.
Mm-hmm.
And, just even knowing what you have,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes they'll try to disguise it as something that you're familiar with, because they're, like again, I do have, and a lot of us use Microsoft Office. So that's a very common, I guess, Trojan horse. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but
Yep. Nope.
you
Totally
know,
makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's aspects like that, Dina. It's also aspects, simple phone messages, right? Especially right around right now, tax season, folks will get freaked out by the fact that, oh my gosh, it's a Social Security office calling me, or it's the FBI calling me, or trust me, they're not going to call you. If you're in trouble with them, the last thing they're going to do is call you to give you a heads up and say, hey, we're coming after you, right?
Yeah.
That's not what they would do if you genuinely are in trouble, right? From that perspective, there would be a knock on your door type of an experience, or something a lot more formal, right? Versus, and that's really why they're called phishing attempts, is they just spread these all out in a blast aspect, sometimes hundreds to thousands, tens of thousands at a time. And believe it or not, Dina, all it takes is one or two to make it worthwhile, right? And so that's why they keep doing it. That's why this keeps propagating. That's why this is such an extreme issue for all of us. Then that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping out your folks and helping out the SMB, again, the small mid-sized business industry, because unfortunately they don't always get the right information.
Absolutely. And, like you said, there's so many different angles to it because most of us have some sort of personal life,
Hmm.
hopefully, right?
Hmm.
And you have a lot of setup of your normal things that you take care of, your bills, your spending, your vacations. I mean, all of what
Sure.
we do, everything's there. And then, like you said, everything in your business everything's online. And especially with COVID, of course, that amplified everything, I think probably 100 times more than it was a year ago.
Hmm.
And it's not slowing down.
Right.
So for
Right.
all of us, as we think about moving forward, you know, and we'll get into some tips and things like that. But again, it's just so important for us to be thinking about these things proactively
Hmm.
and not just waiting till you get that email, somebody clicks it. And I think it was that one years and years ago, it was called like the pink slip virus or
Hmm.
something,
Hmm.
where it got through the workplace and everyone was, clicking on it and it would put this pink screen on or something and shut everything
Hmm.
down. And so, these things are really serious. And for me in HR and you in cybersecurity, we oftentimes have to partner on these items to figure out how or what risk it's bringing to the organization and impact to the people. And so, again, just really for us to be aware of what we're doing and really have a really good strategy in place to make sure we're protecting our information.
Exactly, exactly. And that's like I said earlier, having a good, strong cyber campaign with your organization that you come out on a regular basis. Again, talking about phishing, talking about ransomware attacks, talking about protecting your information, especially from internet-facing services. Strong passwords. I cannot stress that one enough. Having strong passwords. I know there's other technology right now, facial recognition. If you're worried about strong passwords, you're not really, interested in learning the 15 character, 18 character, whatever, there's the key lockers that you can purchase fairly easy. There's apps today that can function the same exact way. And like I said, patching your systems, not just from your phones, but your personal equipment as well, your laptops and your servers on a much regular basis. That's where a lot of these vulnerabilities, especially the big ones, a lot of the real big vulnerabilities really fall into one of these five right now. SolarWinds, for example, just occurred a couple months back. And the root cause of that, the FBI was involved and they did, a month's worth of study and research. And the media kept telling everybody, Dina, that, hey, this was some advanced threat actor that did this. And this is an advanced, cyber attack. And this was an advanced this or advanced that. And what it turned out to be is there was an intern that actually used the weakest possible password and got compromised
Oh, wow.
through a phishing attack, right? And didn't know any better, didn't go through their formal processes. And so here's a large behemoth company that's in the cyberspace, and even they got compromised. So that's one of the things, about this is this could happen to anybody. And this is, again, one of the reasons why we're passionate about helping out the small and medium-sized companies so that we can get that information to them as well and helping strengthen us as a community, right? As a society within this space.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and take our first break. That's a perfect opportunity for us to make sure that we get our announcements in. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, everyone, let's get back on. Let's get started again. So, Dick, today I'm with my special guest, Damir Bresic from the VCO Group. And this is your host, Dena Davis from the Business Breakdown of Davis Hill LLC, also known as Davis Hill Coaching and Consulting. And we've been getting really, really into this topic. And this is actually a lot of fun for me because I'm a self professed techie. So
There you go.
anything technology related, except for hardware. That's the part where it kind of glosses over for me. And I have to call in the professionals. But the other things, I really get intrigued and I love the different aspects and learning how it all comes together. And so, our topic today of cybersecurity, again, we're getting right on into it. And so, Damir, I think, again, as a business owner, we started talking a little bit about that. What are some of the common mistakes or pitfalls that you see people like us
Hmm.
do or don't do, I should say,
Sure.
especially when we're getting started or,
Hmm.
maybe launching off our dreams? What are some of the things we do that maybe create or make us more vulnerable?
Yeah. So cybersecurity for those that start out is an extremely complex and sometimes a very scary domain, right, to master. Uh, the biggest problem that I see today is the sheer complexity. And then the fact that folks then fall into this sort of a panacea mode. And what I mean by that is they'll fall for technology, right? So like back in the day, it used to be McAfee, right? You used to get antivirus. Well, today, antivirus does very little on its own, right? And most packages today are not just antivirus; they're an entire litany of aspects in there. If you're utilizing like a Norton, today it does a bunch of different aspects. Antivirus is just one aspect of it, but it actually will start to look for some vulnerabilities on your system as well, and it'll start to do pop-ups for you. So the technology is starting to become a lot more sophisticated, and I think the marketing is also starting to sway certain folks because they start to believe in the marketing that, oh, this is the be all end all, and it really unfortunately isn't. And that's one of the things that we've seen with clients that we talk to is, well, I have this product over here, or I've got, this tool here, and I'm not going to name any names, because when I do that, certain people are like, oh my gosh, that must be a bad product. No, no, no. It's just how it's implemented, it's how it's installed, how it's being maintained, how it's being supported, right? Everything has a value, but it's all it think of like that wall, that perimeter that you're building. It's just a piece to that wall, and it's how you're building that and putting that all together. So to me, when I talk to these folks, I always talk about people, process, technology. Do you have the right folks? Especially if you're more of a medium sized, I'll talk about both small to medium sized. But if you're a medium-sized company and you have somebody that's, an IT person, let's say, send them to classes to understand a little bit about the network security side of the house, so they better understand the tool sets that you do have, right? And if you're a smaller organization, take a look at some of those foundational aspects that I just talked about a couple of times, with regards to making sure that you and whoever's working with you are fully aware of, from a phishing perspective, making sure you guys understand, some of the aspects around ransomware attacks, and other aspects as well. So having tools is one aspect, but making sure that you educate yourself, stay on top of these programs as well. Talk to good advisory programs, especially what you're offering here, Dina. Listen to these types of programs, glean those little nuggets of information, and start to put together a strategy and a plan. And unfortunately, Dina, that's one of the things that I've pretty much seen the most of. So I'm going to leave it. I'll leave this for the question you asked. The simple three, right? And I call them the 3 A's of cybersecurity, right? Your access, your authentication, and your authorization. So access, physical access to your company, to your business, to your network closets, to your devices, so on and so forth. If it's somewhere where it's in a common area, have a multi-factor authentication, or also known as two-factor, in place. What two-factor simply is you can have a soft token on your phone. right? So when you go to log on, you type in, let's say a username, but all of a sudden then your cell phone with that particular app can be that two-factor authentication piece, which only you have your cell phone type of thing, right? And so only you can log on to that system. So those are some simple, easy ways from an accessibility aspect as well as an authentication. I think two-factor is one of the easiest, most simplest aspects to get engaged out there. And there's a number of different products out there. But then the last thing is authorization. So if you have a small company and you have, let's say, a team of 2, 4, whatever, not everybody on that team should have access to all of your data, specifically your sensitive data. And again, when we talk about sensitive data, it's a person's, not only their name, address, date of birth, driver's license number, social security number. Those are the common ones, but credit card information, any e-commerce style information, making sure that only the folks that should be dealing with that are the only ones that have access to that information.
And I appreciate that too, because it means that you need to think about this, treat it like an actual legitimate business decision.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Make sure
mm-hmm.
you do a reasonable amount of research as you
Right.
can, connect with the right people. So I love that because a lot of times I think maybe you and I can share some of the pain points or pitfalls that we see business owners is they call you when there's an emergency, which is
Exactly.
great. And they do the same thing to me in HR. They're like, oh, I don't need to see you, but hey, whoa, we got this problem. And you're like,
Right,
well,
right,
we might have been able to prevent that problem.
right.
And so I think about a couple of things. Like I said, I put my techie hat on. I'm over here salivating a little bit. So I think about things even like, where is your data being backed up?
Mm-hmm,
Do you have a backup?
mm-hmm,
How do you retrieve that as a
mm-hmm.
business owner? So if you happen to get some sort of, maybe you're traveling and you're on a Wi-Fi. That's happened to me before, by the way.
Okay.
So be very careful of that. Uh, you're thinking about your data, your customers, your CRM. You have all this information, your finances.
Sure.
And so all of that, even just fundamentally, where are you even saving it?
Mm-hmm.
So what are some advice that you would share just fundamentally on that? Like how do we
Yeah.
start?
Yeah. Yeah, so let me start with the real basic first, and then let me go into the depths of the question that you're asking. Number one, let's just make sure folks out there don't get lulled into, well, if I just sign on to my machine, that should be good enough. No, there really should be steps and boundaries to get to your data, right? So your folders and file systems should actually be on it should, first of all, it should never be stored on, let's say, a personal device, right? Your laptop, if you will. That data should never be there. I am now a big proponent of sending everything to the cloud.
Mhm.
So I've advised, and the reason being is it is fairly inexpensive to do setting up a simple system. You go out to Amazon, for example, or it could be Microsoft's Azure, or you can go out to Google. Those are the big three, but Amazon is the largest one. It's also come to be the most cost effective, but I'm not saying that means better. Right. So you need to go do your own research of what you think is right. If you're a heavy Microsoft Office shop, Azure's probably going to be a much better fit. If you're into Teams and you're sharing a lot of the documents, I wouldn't then do AWS. I would do more of an Azure approach. But the same concept, fairly easy to set up. You can get the operating system set up through Amazon. The storage capacity can be set up there through Amazon. You can send all of your information up there. They're in what are called buckets, right? And and buckets is just a cloud way of saying files, right?
Mhm.
So you've heard the term S3 buckets, things of that, right? Those are just files that are for you, right? And the nice thing is you don't have to worry anymore about the maintenance, the support cost, or anything of that caliber. And some of your older information you can actually archive into what's known as a frozen storage. So it's just out there, but you're not really paying for all of the active information. So there's some cost-effective aspects that they also do provide. But you're paying a nominal monthly rate versus every couple of years having to buy brand new network equipment, things of that caliber. So again, that's kind of taking it from the very, very simple all the way out to the larger organizations. The few aspects that I would definitely have your folks consider, if you're a medium-sized or larger organization, definitely look at having your information backed up on a regular basis. If for your business that's daily or weekly or monthly, whatever that fits into your particular schedule, but definitely follow that level of discipline. Have some sort of a business continuity plan, and regardless if you're a small business or a large business. And what I mean by business continuity is if something occurs to your data, or something occurs to your equipment, something occurs to uh, whatever, right? Your business, if it's a brick and mortar, something happens, what would you do, right? So walk through that scenario. Spend a day or two with your team to walk through those kind of aspects and go through all of those what ifs, right? And I think where the mistake that certain people make is because they don't understand it, they believe or assume that, Sally over here, the tech person, she's got it taken care of, we're good. No, walk through that with them. That's the big, when I talk to certain business owners and I ask them, where's your data stored? I don't know, Sally over here is taking care of it. So we walk over to Sally's desk and we ask her, hey, where's the data stored? Well, it happens to be stored all over the place because that's how she thought about it. Some of it is actual physical hard copy files, some of it actually stored on a server, some of it's stored in the cloud. And those are kind of the disparative actions that if let's say Sally wins the lottery and decides not to come to work anymore, well, now that business owner has some problems. And that was the exact scenario that I actually shared with them, and which caused them to go into, that plan of attack to address this for a couple of days. My point is, have a plan. Have a plan. If something occurs, go to that worst case scenario. And it doesn't matter if you're a general e-commerce site, you're just selling some things out on Etsy, to actual brick and mortar, let's say you're an agent, you're selling insurance, real estate, whatever, or you're a large nonprofit organization, you're a church, you're some sort of a social, organization, but you have thousands of members, right? All of that information is of value to somebody. So think about those aspects and put those into mind. And again, think of it in the 3 A's of cybersecurity: the access, who authenticates, and who's authorized to that data.
Awesome. Well, Damir, we're time up for our next break. So we'll just take a quick break and be right back.
Sounds good.
All right, everyone, let's get back on to the train here, the business breakdown train. I don't know where that came from. I thought about party train for a second because I'm having so much fun.
There you go.
So let's get on the business breakdown party train. So I'm loving this topic, cybersecurity. Like I said, it's one of those things where it's such a juggernaut. Like you said, it's really complicated to the average person, but it's something that we all need to have some sort of awareness of, like at least the minimum awareness, know where to go. That's kind of my philosophy on things that we don't always have deep expertise in. And so, we were talking about a couple things as you were pointing out some of the tips that you were given. So first thing I think about is data storage. I wrote down just the term data storage strategy. Mm-hmm. So, in our roles, we work a lot with admins, and we work a lot with people that we charge to store and to figure out how and where to keep things. And that ends up being, I think, not only just an issue or potential risk issue for cybersecurity, but for a number of things for us internally because of access to information, confidentiality, might be medical, HIPAA related. So there's all these other aspects related to that. And to be quite honest with you, I've never, ever seen a company put conscious effort towards that. And it's more like, oh, just you do it. It's kind of delegated to the admins. And then, again, you get things saved and they're organized usually for the person more so than the organization. And so as an organization, it's hard to then access or find information or to be able to pinpoint all of the risk elements. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that? Because that was really intriguing to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that particular topic.
Yeah, so data storage could actually be a whole conversation on its own. So simply put, it has to be structured in some sort of a logical way. And think of building a house, right? We all know what a house is, but I don't know if anyone here has ever built their own house. But in essence, you buy the land. So think of that as a database, right? So you buy the hardware, you get the information, and then what you do is you will dig a hole for the house and pour the foundation. Well, that in essence is your overall file structure, right? How big are these files? Are you talking a couple gigs, or are you talking terabytes of data, right? Or petabytes of data, which is even bigger, right? So how big is this really going to be? But then at the same time, you got to think about, is this a 1-story, a 2-story? Are we talking an investment property, where it's a 4-unit or whatever? But that literally needs to be how folks think about their data structure, is what will this eventually be? And even though not all the rooms will get filled in this data structure house, if you will, that we're building here, Dena, you do need to know what is the capacity of your business and what can it grow into, right? And so it will require you to sit down with somebody that knows a little bit about this, or you have somebody on your team that knows a little bit about the SQL. Microsoft SQL is probably one of the most common database storage systems out there. It's the easiest one to implement as well. Microsoft has done that, but then you're sort of locked in and you're tied into that, right? And they're just really a whole variety of different tables. But then you have to think about, all right, well, who do you want to have access to each one of these rooms of this house? And that's really where, when we went back to, when we talked about in the last segment, we talked about the 3 A's. I talked about access, the authentication, and then authorization. So who has access to this data? There is a monitoring and detection tool known as a SIM. It's a cyber information um, management tool that really is a great aggregator of information. And what the SIM will actually do is it'll start to take all this information, and you can start to have it take a look at who actually is authenticating, when are authenticating, and if all of a sudden you start adding certain aspects. And I know I'm getting a little complicated here, but I try to keep it simple. But if you start adding like geolocation, right, to their laptops, and this person is from Ohio and they live in the Cleveland area, but now all of a sudden they're accessing your data set from California. All right, well, something's wrong. Did this person go on vacation? Did they take their laptop with them? So on and so forth. And again, that's where SIM technology can really come in to help out. And there's other aspects to that as well that can actually help you put that together. But the last thing then is going through, and on a very regular basis, going through and monitoring those SIM logs. And again, your system information and event management tool, and there's a variety of them out there. There's a couple of them that are actually open source. So SIM is not a brand. SIM is the name of the tool, and again, that stands for Security Information and Event Management. And as I said, there's a number of them that are free that you can try out. But what it'll do for you is it'll start to aggregate to the level that you need it to, on who exactly is authenticating and is authorized to get to this information that you want. So that's one aspect of it, right? The other aspect of it is, how often are you backing this up? And there are a whole litany of third-party vendors that you can look up to see of where you can back this up to. Again, if you do it in the cloud, you can have that set up with either your AWS account or your Azure account or Google account. They can take care of that all for you. But then who do you want to, on your team or in your company, who do you want to have access to that? So you should have that limited down to as few necessary people as possible, you, the business owner, and somebody else, is that ideal for a small company? It really should only be one or two people. And of course, for the business owner, your most trusted of all folks, right? Because in essence, they have keys to the kingdom, right?
Right.
For the medium-sized company, it's a little bit different, right? From there, you're probably going to have yourself, somebody in a leadership position, and obviously an admin out there. And then the last thing is managing the size, right? If you think about when we started this off, we started talking about the size of this house or the size of this data. And that's really where, certain tools, like a SIM, again, a security information and event manager, can come in there and help folks manage the size of their data, and have you come in and take a look at, all right, do we really need 5 terabytes of data constantly going up to the cloud? Because that can be extremely expensive. If that's true for your business and that's what you guys need, then that's fine. But if it's not, then you know how to trim the fat, if you will, for lack of a better term. Now, you don't have to lose the storage, you don't have to delete it. You can actually, I mentioned in the last segment, you can actually take and archive the storage. And in storage terms, it's actually called frozen storage, or sometimes glacier storage. It's a very common term across the board, across the industry, or some flavor of that. They seem to like that ice age aspect.
Yeah.
But that's really storage that's your data, but it's put off where you're not really looking at it at all given time, and it will take time to retrieve. But we're just talking hours, we're not talking days.
Right. Now, another thing as I listen to you again, kind of putting both of my lenses on through the IT and the HR, we've talked a lot about your employees.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple things is, first of all, we need to have some level, like you said, of assessment of our own risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that can, I think, just be the basic, meaning, an inventory of what you use,
Mm-hmm.
and having a way to make sure that, like you said, you have it set up in a way that is going to minimize as much risk exposure to your data. And then you talked about the plan, and of course, how you're going to implement, monitor, and continue to reinforce what the plan has given to you as far as keeping yourself more secure. But we keep talking about employees. And so here's my thing. This is why I keep bringing this up. We have to have the plan, because
Mm-hmm.
when we bring employees in, we train them on the plan.
Mm-hmm.
We don't just come and bring them in and say, hi, get to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's especially for small business owners, because we've talked about that
Sure.
audience a lot, small, and maybe not so much as mid-sized, but small to mid-sized businesses. We have very lean teams.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have contractors and others that we bring in that may just only be with us for periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to have ways to bring them into our systems and processes quickly and easily and
Mm-hmm.
efficiently. And so, I think about that because, again, if you're not even thinking about this as a plan, here's what most people do. I'm just going to be quite flat out honest. Because, again, I see this on the front end because I'm doing all the onboarding and things
Okay.
with the employees. We get like 2 policies about cybersecurity that everybody must sign, and we've got to
Mm-hmm.
hunt you down to make you sign your cybersecurity policy. But that's like it. Like there's, for most places, your bigger companies are way better, obviously.
Sure.
They have a lot of
Sure.
resources, but you don't get much more than that. And so, I just think about that because, again, when we get employees coming into our organization, it's like we're inviting them into our house.
Correct.
And, we have to have things at least reasonably prepared for them
Sure.
to be successful.
Yes. Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is setting, a couple things, setting the appropriate expectations, right? When you have people come to your house, certain people have an etiquette about how they want you to behave, right? In my mom's house, when you walk in, you take your shoes off,
Yeah.
right? You do not walk throughout the house because she will track you down. And
Yes.
I will tell you what, that is one rule my brother and I, we've learned a long time ago. You do not break. And the ironic thing is with my wife Diane, her mom has the exact same rule. So that was something we grew up in. But again, I use that because that's the first thing that came to mind is when you have somebody enter into your business, there's an etiquette that you want them to follow. We call them in the industry, we call them processes, policies, standards, if you will. And having those, let's break it down even simpler, set expectations, right? So you don't want just anybody from an employee perspective to have access to data, right? You
Right.
want to get that limited to administrators of that database, of that data per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either in an IT capacity or in a cybersecurity capacity, depending on how big your organization is. But you want somebody that has and meets a certain expectation. There's a lot of programs, certificate programs out there that are really great 2-year programs, and those could be a minimum requirement. You're right. You're not necessarily looking for somebody that comes in with a 4-year degree. You could have somebody that comes in with that minimum requirement. Again, Dena, from an HR perspective, you could help those folks out as well and really start to put together a menu of, all right, well, if you want somebody that's going to take a look at your data, right, be your database administrator, which is what it's typically known as, this is the minimum requirement. And if you want to talk after the call, I can give you some help with that as well to share with your listeners. But at the end of the day, look, the expectations of when they walk in, what you want them to do, and then the day-to-day functional aspects, right? But most importantly is, what is that vision that you as a business owner, founder, or leader, right? If it's a bigger organization or medium-sized organization, the leader of that, what is that vision? What are those expectations? Finding the right people that align to that so they can appropriately execute. And really what that is that's just the overall culture, right? And that starts with setting those appropriate expectations of before they walk into your house or before they join the team, they know exactly what you're looking for.
Absolutely. And we could talk all day about HR and culture and teams too. We'll have to do that
Absolutely.
on another episode. I'd like
Absolutely.
to do that actually, is really
Sure.
just talk a little bit more into that. We'll definitely schedule another for our next get
Sounds
together.
good.
Sure thing. So we'll take a quick break right here and we'll be right back with you with the business breakdown. All right, everyone. Thank you for your patience with us for our short break, and we're back with you for the business breakdown. This is your host, Dena Davis with Davis Hill LLC, and I'm with my special guest, Mr. Damir Bresic from the VCO Group, and we are all into the cybersecurity, right? So we're going to continue out on our last segment for this topic, and let's talk about some of the tips and recommendations, those final takeaways for business owners. So, Damir, I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you close us out.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Dena, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. This was awesome. I truly enjoyed my time here. I hope all of your listeners did as well. And I'll just throw this out. If you get questions that come your way of like, hey, you guys never covered this topic or that topic in this realm, I would be happy to address them for you. If you want to answer it at a future podcast, or if you'd like to have me back, I'd be willing to do that. A few just quick takeaways, aside from everything else that we've talked about, and you're kind of starting to get overwhelmed and you're not really sure, what Dena or this guy Damir have been talking about. I'm lost. I don't know where to go. I kind of put together a hit list of items that you should start to really, anybody, if you're a small business owner or a medium sized or a large, here's where you can start. Do what's known as a SWOT analysis on your business, right? The SWOT are your strengths, W is weaknesses, O is for opportunities, and T is threats. So when you think about cybersecurity, IT, just the security of your business, if you will, where are you good at? Where are you not so good at? What do you really need to focus on? And really, what are those threats that you have not considered or put forth? And if there's anything that we've talked about or covered out there, you can align that into this. Make sure changing a password is a big aspect. A lot of folks out there think 90 days is appropriate. If you're into e-commerce, it should probably be a little bit more frequent. 90 days is probably the minimum. 60 days is a little bit more relevant. Strong passwords, multiple characters, numbers. The newest thing is doing passphrases, but a lot of people don't like that because they get confused. So definitely get an app. Key lockers, what they're known as. But the app on your phone will actually save it for you. You can't just get in. So if somebody gets to your phone, they can't just open your key locker app. You actually have to sign into that as well with a different passcode. So that's a big thing. also, which we haven't really talked about, but also strengthen your home network, right? I at home have a router, right? So I don't just use an IPS Spectrum is a big one over here. I know ISP. I apologize. I knew that was wrong as soon as I said it. Your internet service provider, ISP. Don't always trust what they've got. Sometimes they give you that brick that you see, and it's kind of with the blinky lights. And you're like, okay, well, I should be protected. Not always. Sometimes that is like the minimum standard requirement that they themselves have from an FCE standpoint. Boy, I'm having a hard time, Dena, here with the acronyms.
It's a many.
FEC standpoint. Sorry. But so yourself, go to your local Best Buy, talk to the technicians over there, do your research online. What is most appropriate to you? What is most appropriate for you? If you do a lot of things today, especially with the COVID situation from a wireless standpoint, and you're doing a lot of your work from home, all right, you need to get those extra barriers out there. And there's a whole litany of items. Norton is a big one, Semantics another one, LifeLock, who Norton just bought. Those are some of the more common ones. I'm not endorsing. I'm just letting you guys know those. Just to point you guys in the right direction. Um, and at the end of the day, if you're that small to medium sized growing organization, think about hiring somebody to come in to audit your system, to start to give you a risk assessment. We just did something with a company, a logistics company, not too far from here in Cleveland, where, we walked in and the owner was completely convinced we wouldn't find anything. And we showed up with a list of 12 risk items. Now, they weren't all bad, but he did have a couple critical items that we told him, well, you should handle this right away, and here's what to do, right? So part of our solution wasn't just to give him a list, but we also gave them the steps that he needed to take to actually get that in play. And so these were tiered into must do right now to, okay, these aren't so bad, but these could be as you start to grow. These are some aspects of what you should start to look at, and then some long term. So especially as you scale, right? As you as an organization scale, when the company was just a 4-person shop, you've got a certain level of risk compared to if you're a 10-person to 100-person shop, risk aspects across the board. And the last thing is, if you have kids, keep your eye on what they're streaming. Keep your eye on where they're going. Keep an eye on what they're doing, the games they're playing. Just keep I'm not necessarily saying do a Big Brother kind of a thing, but definitely be show a level of concern to see if they're talking to their friends. And if you notice on certain games like Xbox and some of the the PS4s, PS5s, they can start interacting and talking to folks from anywhere, right? Anyone that has an internet connection. Be a little mindful of that. Be a little mindful of what they're doing, and talk to them about some of the internet risks, some of the internet aspects, right? Which that of course is a whole different subject matter. But that was kind of my hit list of not only from your work life but to your home life, because in today's COVID era, where a majority of us, 90% of us are working now from home, these aspects and the streaming aspects of what your kids are looking on is actually going to slow down your e-commerce, right? And some people don't even realize that. So take a look at all those aspects. And again, any other questions, feel free to bring it to Dena's attention, and I'd be happy to work it out with you afterwards.
Yeah, and you brought up a couple of things that I think are very important for us to keep top of mind. When you have a business, you're not just doing work, you're not just doing stuff. You're running a business, and that
Mm-hmm.
business has many parts and pieces. And so, as a business owner, I need to be thinking always about what has to happen now, but also I need to be thinking about, like you said, how am I going to scale into the future? How am I going
Mm-hmm.
to grow? And how does my business scale and grow with me? And so I hear you very loudly in that sense on the cybersecurity. I feel that same way on the talent side,
Mm-hmm.
because as things continue to move through that organization, you need to make sure that you're bringing your people along with you. and
Exactly.
making sure that they understand how things have changed and the levels of risk and how that has possibly changed or increased as we grow or scale.
Hmm.
Maybe we started picking up international clients, and now there are other types of things we have to be more mindful of. So,
Hmm.
again, it's just so important that these pieces become a comprehensive plan with parts and pieces to them. So you have I use people process technology all the time too.
Hmm.
That's what it
Absolutely.
is. It is. I mean, that's just such a great way to really look at how these things come together. You need
Hmm.
all three to have the right opportunity to assess it from their viewpoint, but also figure out how these things pull together. And then ultimately, again, how you get your people through whatever training you have, what's the right type of training. And I say that very honestly because sometimes that training is, oh, go sit with Damir.
Hmm.
Okay, well, did we even explain to him what we wanted to make sure
Right.
people are doing or not doing or retaining, or do they have to practice certain things before they can implement it? So, these are all very thoughtful things where it's not just signing your cybersecurity policy
Right. Right.
and you're covered and you're clear.
Right. And as I said at the very beginning of this, that's where the SWOT analysis comes in, right? Start with just a very simple, fundamental risk assessment process, right? That's probably the easiest one out there. And if you are in a situation where you are breached, folks tend to panic. I just had a situation with a really good friend of mine, runs his own business out of his home and was literally being hacked as he had me on the phone. And I'm like, wait, what are you telling me? He's like, I got this call from this guy and he's installing something on my machine right now. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Is he, well, explain that to me. Is he in your house? Like, did he just knock on your door? He's like, no, no, no. I saw this email and it looked legitimate, said I was at risk. So I called the number and it was one of those things that lulls you, right? They lull you into a false sense of you're in trouble. And he's like, but he's installed, I looked up his website. It all looks legitimate. It's a whole corporation. And, I told him, I said, hey, go to your modem, pull the plug. And he's like, why? I go, pull the plug on your modem. Does that instant, like within seconds. I'm still on the phone. I said, I'm looking at his website right now. Something doesn't add up. You're telling me this is he's just south of Erie. You're telling me it's a PA business, but everything on their website is showing they're out of the UK. Right.
Mm.
And so right there, an initial, those are the simple little things. If they're telling you things that are not matching up, right? If it's Amazon.com and all of a sudden, but Amazon is spelled wrong or something weird, right? Or if it's not a .com, right? It's got a different, the three letters at the end or the two letters at the end, especially if it's two letters. Now it's not Amazon, right? And I had them pull that off, and luckily and very fortunately, we were able to work with PayPal to retrieve what he had. But the last thing that I'll share with you guys, if you do happen to be breached and you don't know anybody that's in the cyberspace, there's a simple, quick, easy way to get the FBI involved, and it's a site called ic3.gov. Again, I as in Ignatius, C as in Charlie, three, the number three, so IC3 .gov. And again, that is for if you're a business owner, that's to get the FBI's attention on your breach. You can also always contact your local police department. They have a cybersecurity. Most large cities now do have a cybersecurity division as well. But those are worst case scenarios, right?
Right.
Those are, unfortunately, we do have to talk about that. And so I wanted to make sure I very quickly here at the end threw that out there, because it's happened. All of us have had our data stolen, or know somebody that's had their data stolen. Like I said, in this particular case, with a good friend of mine, called me up as the attack happened to be happening, and I ended up spending another hour or two cleaning up his machine and cleaning out a bunch of files. Unfortunately, he didn't lose anything, right? But he was very fortunate, right? And so again, not everybody knows somebody in the cybersecurity industry. So those are just a couple of other resources that I encourage your folks, if they do happen to go and fall, are in a situation where there is an incident. Those are a few resources to utilize. But the biggest thing is do your homework. Do your homework,
Absolutely.
plan appropriately, set up a plan, work the plan, bring in the right people, into your team. It's like adding folks to your family, right? You
Yeah.
want to go through that appropriate
Yeah.
vetting process. And if folks need help, Dena Davis, great resource to help with that vetting process as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the vote of confidence there. All
Absolutely.
right, Damir. Well, we're at our time here for today. So, if you wouldn't mind, if you could just close us out, make sure everybody has your contact information and we can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so it's the VCO Group.com. We're actually on Facebook as well. We're getting a LinkedIn site going here shortly, but the VCO Group.com is the easiest way to get a hold of me. And there's a whole comment section in there. And if you just type in Dena Davis in your comment section, I'll know where you guys came from.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Damir. It's been great seeing you, old friend.
Absolutely. Same here, Dena.
All right. Well, thank you all. And join us next time for our next episode on the Business Breakdown.